Good afternoon. My name is Sandra Sheffer. I'm the president of the Democratic Women's Club of Greater Broward. And today we're going to have a chance to speak to Justin McCormack. He's one of the candidates for Broward County State Attorney. So during this session, we're going to talk a little bit about vote by mail. We're going to encourage people to register for the census and to request their vote by mail ballots. But you didn't come here to hear from me, so let me let Justin McCormack introduce himself.
Good evening, Ms. Sheffer. My name is Justin McCormack. I'm running for state attorney here at Broward County, the 17th Judicial Circuit, to be proper. I am an assistant state attorney here now in Broward County. I've been prosecuting here for a little over 5.5 years. I first moved to Broward County in 1994 when I was 13. I went to middle school while I was living in Broward, as well as high school, and then I went to the University of Florida for college and law school.
All right.
I can keep going if you like, or if you want to just.
No. I might interrupt you sometime if your answers get a little long and you say something that kind of hits me, and I'm like, no, we got to talk about this. So I'll do that, but I'll try to give you a chance to give all of your answers, because one of the reasons why I wanted to do the setup this way was to give people an opportunity to explain themselves. So a lot of the other forums, you're only talking for like 1 or 2 minutes at a time, and I don't think it really gives you a chance to develop what it is that your platform is, and I want people to really hear what it is that you want to do and what's your vision for the office. All right, so you're at the state attorney's, you're assistant state attorney right now, and tell me what it is that you do at the office.
So right now I serve in the Special Prosecutions and Public Corruption Unit. I investigate cases and I prosecute them, which is unusual for our office. Most prosecutors, they get the case when it's already filed by another prosecutor that files it. But for most cases, I investigate the case and I determine if there's probable cause, if we should charge someone with a crime after my investigation, and then I file the charges and then I prosecute the case. And the types of cases that I investigate include police officers, law enforcement, police brutality, police misconduct, any kind of crimes committed by law enforcement, politicians, lawyers, people that work for the government, people that work for the city, and people that generally either break the trust of the people or something very particular that the state attorney would want us to handle carefully.
So how is it that the cases come to your attention for you to investigate?
They could come a variety of ways. They could come by just someone reporting an incident to us and providing us with some information, and then we'll take the investigation from there. It could come from a police department. It could come from an internal affairs place. It could come from something we see on TV. Case could come from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Sometimes they'll be informed of something, or the Officer of Inspector General, they'll be tipped off that something happened. They'll do an investigation and they'll send their information to us. So it could come to us from a variety of ways. There isn't a method where we would, turn it down. If someone brings something to our attention, if it's something that falls under our umbrella, we'll investigate it. If it's something that should be investigated by somebody else, some other organization, some other agency, then we'll refer it to them. I also work with the FBI on some cases and some investigations where it might be a crime something that they'll prosecute, or they might investigate and say, you know what, this is more appropriate for something to be filed with state crimes. There are federal crimes. There are some federal crimes that are different than state crimes. So depending upon the conduct, it might be more appropriate charged in one place than another, depending on what happened.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So now you're doing this work. You said you've been doing it for about 5 years. Why is it, and you just decided that you want to run for state attorney? What is it that made you hear the call and decide that you're going to go ahead and subject your life to running for office, right? Sure. I know it's exhausting. It's exhausting just trying to keep up with what's going on. So I can imagine if you're the one that's actually running for the job. So what made you?
It is a lot of work. Yeah. So I've been a prosecutor here for 5.5 years, but I was a prosecutor in Pittsburgh before I came here. And before that, I was a civil plaintiff's attorney in Miami.
Did you become a Steelers fan living in Pittsburgh?
I did not. So
okay.
After law school, I moved to Miami for work. I became a plaintiff's attorney. I represented people that got sick from working with asbestos, as well as people that got hurt by medical malpractice. I sued doctors and hospitals. I married a doctor, and so the conversations at the dinner table then would get, some kind of feisty sometimes.
Mhm.
So I left that work behind. We moved to Pittsburgh because my wife she's a pediatrician, but she wanted to be an emergency room pediatrician. So
Okay.
she needed to get additional training for that, which is known as a fellowship. So she applied to Pittsburgh Children's Hospital and was accepted for their emergency pediatric fellowship. It's a 3-year program. So I moved to Pittsburgh for a short time to be with her, just a few years. I moved there. I took the Pennsylvania bar exam because Florida has no reciprocity with any other state. I passed the bar exam, and I thought that would be a good opportunity for me to enter public service and become a prosecutor. While I was in law school, I was a certified legal intern with the public defender in Gainesville, and I also clerked with the Legal Aid Society in New York for a summer. And that was my first experience with the criminal justice system. I was trying to help people that found themselves in the system, and I realized very quickly that the prosecutor was the gatekeeper, had all the power, held all the cards, and I decided that if I had the opportunity to enter public service sometime down the road, that I would want to be on that side, that I could have more of an opportunity to help everybody, to help victims, that were affected by crime, and to help people that found themselves on the other side as the accused in the criminal justice system. So when I moved to Pittsburgh, I applied for the job. I was interviewed. I was one of 20 people I was interviewed, and they hired me. The only one of the 20. And I took a significant pay cut. I went from making 6 figures to making $39,000 a year. But I love the work. It was the best job I had. It was exciting. It was fun. I learned a lot. I met a lot of different people. And it was just, I felt real good about the work that I was doing every day, that I was trying to help everybody, basically. I was trying to help the accused as well as society and victims. I learned that most of the crime at the time in Pittsburgh was because of heroin. Either people were addicted to heroin, or they were dealing heroin, or they were dealing heroin just because they were addicted to heroin. So they were selling it to support their habit. They weren't like, drug kingpins or anything like that.
Okay.
But they would face charges as if they were. So I would have opportunities there to look at the case and say, this person is not really a drug dealer, but they're being treated as one, and they may be sent to prison for years for drug dealing. And so I would be able to work with them and get them a reduced charge. In Pennsylvania, drug dealing is a felony. Possession of heroin is a misdemeanor. So I'd be able to say, maybe we could handle this case by treating it justly, but not making the person a convicted felon for life. And trying to get that person the help that they need to get on the road to redemption or on the road to rehabilitation, as opposed to making them a convicted felon, and when really all they are, is addicted to drugs. And that's more, in my opinion, more of a public health issue than something we need to try to send someone to prison for and brand them a felon for life.
All right. So you actually answered one of the things that I was going to talk about, because one of the big problems that I think that happens in Florida is that they've criminalized addiction. You have people that are drug addicts and they keep getting arrested for possession of a controlled substance, possession of marijuana, possession of crack cocaine. Like if this person has never received any treatment, they're going to continue to get arrested for having drugs because they're a drug addict. So like as the next state attorney of Broward County, is that something that you are looking to try to prevent, people that addicts from becoming, felons?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons I'm in the race. It's something I've been preaching about since I first got in the race and I started talking to people and going to events. The majority of the people that come into our jails and into contact with the criminal justice system are not hardened criminals where we need to go hard at them and try to send them to prison for years. There are some people like that, and I've done that. I've convicted people, I've taken them to trial, I've sent them to prison for years, but most people don't need that. Most people that come into the system, majority of people either are addicted to substances, or they have mental health issues,
Exactly.
or they suffer from poverty. And, they're not bad people, they're not terrible people. Sometimes they do bad things, they might make mistakes. And I think by, just putting them in jail or making them convicted felons, only perpetuates a cycle of poverty and incarceration, or addiction and incarceration. And what I'd like to do is try as much as we can to help them not be in that cycle or get out of that cycle and get out of the criminal justice system and, be a productive member of society. Not be a tax burden where we're putting them in jail and paying for them, but help them be a taxpayer where they're successful, they're proud of what they're doing, they're happy that they got a job. When you're a convicted felon, you are legally discriminated against. It's hard for you to get a job. It's hard for you can't vote. It's hard for you to get a loan. It's hard for you to get housing, to go to school. So that's a big problem. And then when people face all those obstacles, there comes a point where then they're more likely to commit a crime and come back into the system.
You actually now, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to take the conversation off a little bit and just kind of come back to it. So I also teach at some of the colleges around here at the School of Justice. I'm going to start teaching at the Institute of Public Safety at Broward College. And one of the things that I talk to my students about is there's a movement. It's not really big in Florida, but in some parts of the United States where they want to do what they call ban the box. You know how they ask you, have you ever been arrested or convicted of a crime? There's a whole movement to say, just why are you even going to ask that question? Because it really, once a person says yes, half the time their application is going into the garbage. What do you think about that? Right? I know that's not what you came to talk about, but that's something that I think is important too.
If they have 10 applicants and they say, okay, well, 3 of them are convicted felons, they say, okay, well, we'll take those 3 out immediately.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I'm on board with trying to get rid of that in many situations. I understand where there might be some types of positions where you might need to know about a criminal history or criminal background, and then you can do that. A lot of places do that anyway, even if, they might not ask you, but they'll pay for a background check. But I do think that in many circumstances, it unfairly harms people from, trying to get back on track in life.
Because of it. Okay. And so you talked about the person that has an addiction, A lot of times they are dual diagnosis type individuals. I have a friend of mine who has her son. He's either schizophrenic, bipolar, but he hears voices, right? He hears voices. And he went on medication before. I think they gave him Prozac, Zoloft, something to that effect. He says he calls me auntie. He's like, auntie, all I do is sleep all day. I'm feel numb. There's nothing I could do. But then he started smoking marijuana. And marijuana made him feel better, right? In terms of, he wasn't hearing the voices anymore, and now they have medical marijuana cards, but at the time that wasn't an issue. That wasn't an option. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's been arrested. He's probably been arrested 20 times because he lives in a area that's heavily policed. That's in a heavily policed community. He gets arrested once or twice a month for possession of marijuana.
Smoking or at the park or something, and the police just roll by and they see him and they just bring him in.
So if you have a case like that comes into the office and you can see the history and you understand that this person also has a mental illness, how is it that you would train the prosecutors in the office to deal with a case like that?
Well, I'll train them look, you got to look at this person is not a criminal, and arresting them and putting them in jail for a little bit of time is not going to help anything. It's not going to solve the problem. Nobody is really going to be happy with that, no matter where you are on the spectrum, because it's just wasting resources, wasting time, wasting money, and it's not addressing any problem or addressing any issue. And so I'd like to build a culture within the office that say, look, we want to protect society. We all want a safe place to live. We want, to serve, to seek justice. But we also have to be smart about what we're doing, and that every crime does not need punishment. Everybody does not need to be arrested and prosecuted and convicted and jailed and sent to prison. Maybe some people just need to be arrested, and then that's the end of it.
Right.
I talk to police, and we discuss things, and they agree with me. They say, sometimes we need to have an arrest. There might be an issue, out in public, a crowd, disorderly conduct, somebody acting up. We need to stop that. We need to take somebody in, but then that could be the end of it. Like, they spend the night in jail, they come out, we look at it, talk to whoever, talk to the officer, maybe talk to anyone that was around. All right, this isn't something that we need to go forward with. We don't need to file this case and bring them into court and have them hire a lawyer and take them to trial and all that type of stuff.
Okay.
Let me get back to a question you asked earlier,
Yes.
which I went away from the direct answer because I was telling you about more of the things that came to mind. But I want to go back to, so I learned, I learned how to be a prosecutor in Pittsburgh, and I had a pretty broad amount of discretion with how to resolve cases. My supervisors saw that I quickly got a grasp of, what's fair, what's not, what we need to focus on, what we don't. And I didn't need to ask a supervisor every time I wanted to drop a charge or make a plea bargain or resolve a case that I thought was more fairly. Okay.
Okay.
So I love the work. I thought it was great. I was proud of what I was doing. Then my wife graduated her program. We wanted to start a family. My parents lived down here. Her parents lived in Florida. So we moved back to Florida. A friend of mine was working at the state attorney's office here and said, hey, if you enjoy the work as a prosecutor, come and work with me. And I said, you know what, I want to do that. I really like the work. I didn't get I wasn't sick of it. I want to keep doing this. So I started with the state attorney's office. And immediately I felt that, I was in a different kind of world.
Why do you say that?
The way the office worked, the cases I had to handle, and everything felt like it was not efficient. It was not smooth. It could be done a lot better. We had we had many more cases here, and that's expected because there's more people. But we also had a much bigger office, and there were a lot of cases that could have been resolved quickly and efficiently and effectively and justly, where we could focus our resources on the cases that need to be addressed. But it seemed to me like the way the office was we have an unlimited amount of resources to prosecute everything, and if the check marks are filled on a case, then we need to prosecute it. And the only way we're going to drop a charge, not even a case, but a charge, is if there is a legal basis. And if there is, you have to talk to a supervisor, you have to get approval, and then you have to write a memo justifying the legal reasoning for dropping this charge. And to me, it was like, this is insane.
Mm-hmm.
So right away, I started looking around. I was like, this has got to change. This is not effective and efficient. What I understood as a plea bargain was you got arrested on 3 or 4 charges. I would say, plead to the top charge. Here's the offer. We're going to drop the other charges. The defendant felt like they were getting a deal. I was getting justice because they're not going to get sentenced in most cases to more than that.
Mm-hmm.
The defendant felt like his lawyer was doing his job by negotiating something. It worked out for everybody. We were able to resolve a case fairly and justly and move on. If the charges, maybe shouldn't be tried, maybe there was some room there, some negotiating, I could drop some charges, resolve a case, plea it out, and move on. And then when I came here and I tried to do that, my very first day, my very first case, guy was charged with marijuana and possession of marijuana and possession of paraphernalia. I said, plead to the possession of marijuana. We'll drop the paraphernalia charge.
It was a felony marijuana possession or misdemeanor marijuana?
No, this was misdemeanor.
Okay.
And, I'll give you a withhold on it, court costs. And I got back to my office that day. My supervisor says, you can't do that. There's no such thing as a free crime. I said, well, what are you talking about? It's not a free crime. Who's going to get the same sentence? You can't drop anything, not even a charge, unless you get supervisor approval. You write a memo, legal basis. I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense to me. So for the marijuana cases, I'm sure you might know this because you're an attorney, but for any drug case in Florida, if you're adjudicated misdemeanor, felony, you're getting your driver's license suspended for 6 months.
Yes.
So for me, as the misdemeanor level, every single case I ever prosecuted, possession of marijuana, was a withhold and court costs. It's the lowest I could do without dropping the case, which I couldn't do unless there was a legal basis. And there, you'd have to pay $303 with the court costs. But you wouldn't get your license suspended. And that was a real goal of mine, because if you get your license suspended, Florida is not the place where you could walk to work, walk to school,
take the bus,
or take the bus, or take the train. You got to drive everywhere.
Yes.
So what happens if your license is suspended? Now you're driving. Now you pull over. Now you're charged with another crime.
Yes.
It's a crime.
Yes.
It's not just a ticket.
No.
Now you have another crime on your record. You're charged with driving with license suspended.
With knowledge. with knowledge, because you knew it was suspended from the plea deal.
Yeah. Now you got to pay more fees, more fines, more court costs, and then what happens? You get stuck in this cycle. So when I was handling those cases, I would tell people, go get your license reinstated. If you were charged with your registration you didn't have, or your insurance, that's a crime to drive without your registration.
Yes.
So I would tell people I came in the courtroom, I was like a social worker. I would tell them, look, go get this fixed. Come back, show me you got it fixed. I'm going to change it from a crime to an infraction. And I'd have to find a correlating infraction. And then instead of paying $300 something, you only had to pay $80 or $6 or something like that.
And can I tell you, again, I tell you I would interrupt you sometimes. And can I tell you, I find that to be the most ridiculous thing. Because when you get pulled over by the police officer, they know that they can figure out that your car is registered. So once they put in your tag number or whatever it is, they know that your car is registered with the DMV. And I'm like, you're going to give someone a ticket or arrest somebody for not having the actual physical paper when you've checked, and once you've confirmed that this person is who they said he is and the car is registered, you know that car is registered. You also know that person have insurance, but you're going to ticket them anyway.
Well, what I'm talking about is when it's not registered.
Oh, it's not registered at all.
They look it up and they say the registration expired. It hasn't been registered.
Okay, that's a different scenario. Okay.
So I would tell people, look, go get your registration fixed. I will change this from a crime to the infraction, to just the ticket. So you don't have a criminal record just for that. And every time I did that, I had to write a memo for that person to my supervisor. I had to sign off on it. So I did this, thousands of times. And it was a lot more work for me, but I did it because it was the right thing to do, to save people from having another thing or criminal record, and then having to pay $300 or $200 something. Okay. That's a lot of money to most people.
It is a lot of money. Some people go to work a whole week and they don't have that much money. Yes.
And make a couple $100. So that was important to me, to try to save them from paying $300 for this, this issue, to avoid from being a criminal.
Right. So there's another thing that happens in Broward County, where it's a very multicultural county, right? You have a lot of immigrants in Broward County from the Caribbean, South America, Central America that are here. I know that you said when they had like misdemeanor marijuana cases, you tried to do a withhold of adjudication.
So I did every time. I didn't try. I did it every time.
You did it every time. However, for immigration purposes, a withhold is considered a conviction. What would you, are you familiar with the immigration consequences of crimes? And if you're not, is that something that you're gonna make sure the prosecutors know? Because sometimes people getting convicted of crimes cause a lot of consequences. I particularly practice immigration law, and I'll give you an example. I have a client who got arrested for child abuse, no harm. He did have he had a marijuana case from before, but with the child abuse, no harm, it put him in a position where he was subject to deportation. Culturally, a lot of people from the islands, South America, Central America, they spank their children. He really didn't know that he can go to jail for spanking his son, right? So that's a cultural thing that, ignorance of the law is not an excuse, but him getting that conviction literally is going to have him deported, and he's going to lose the right to raise his child. Are you willing to train or allow your prosecutors, if and when you become state attorney, to have some sort of discretion and take those types of consequences into consideration when they're offering plea deals?
Absolutely. I have been doing that since I've been a prosecutor, and I will continue to do that as a prosecutor, and I will instruct my assistant state attorneys to take that into consideration. Now, that means sometimes you have a case and you can resolve it justly and fairly, but in a way that doesn't make the person eligible for deportation. And that's what I'll try to do. I won't give someone special treatment because they may face immigration consequences that I wouldn't give to somebody else just because of that issue, because part of my platform is equal justice for all. So I wouldn't give someone an extra special treatment for that. But I think in many circumstances, they can be held, accountable for the crime that they committed in a fair and just way, but we could still avoid a deportation consequence. So I will absolutely, have training on that and instruct my prosecutors to try to resolve cases like that whenever possible. our job as assistant state attorneys is not to deport people. We don't get paid to do that. That's not in our jurisdiction. That's not what we do. And we have enough work to do than to do someone else's work. That's work to be done by the federal agencies and federal agents. So I'll also instruct our people on that, our state attorneys, in that way. And also, we're not going to try to find out if people have immigration, if they might be deported, what their background is. It's not for us to make people uncomfortable asking that. If it's brought to our attention, if we're told that, we will take that into consideration. But my SAs aren't going to go looking for people to find out if they might be deported, to try to see if they can deport them. And the same thing goes for witnesses. We don't want witnesses to be afraid that that might be something that happened to them, because then they won't come forward and they won't testify.
Absolutely.
Now, imagine you're a victim of a crime or someone in your family, and the only witness that can testify is someone that's afraid to come forward because of immigration consequences. So then you can't get justice because someone's afraid that if they come to tell the truth, that they might be, deported or unfairly targeted.
Yeah, that is a big concern. That's an issue that happens more often than most people would think. The immigration.
Yeah, I'm well aware of it.
Yes,
and I think that's one of the things that makes me an excellent candidate for this office, is that I have the experience of working in 2 prosecutors' offices in 2 different states, and in both prosecutors' offices, I started from the bottom up and had to work my way up. When I started here at the state attorney's office in Broward, it was my 4th legal job since I've been a lawyer, and they still made me start like I was fresh out of law school. I was an 8th-year attorney, starting with 1st-year attorneys. And I worked my way up each level, and I saw how everything worked and how cases were being handled every step of the way. And I did the same thing in Pittsburgh. When I started there, I started fresh out with the lawyers fresh out of school. I had been a lawyer for 6 years. I started right at the bottom. So I have the experience and the perspective of how everything works at every level. I started at the lowest level, and then 3rd-degree felonies, 2nd-degree felonies, 1st-degree felonies. Then I was in a special unit known as 1020 Life, where all I prosecuted were shooting cases. And then I went to the unit I'm in now. So I have all this fresh experience and this perspective, and I have these plans and these visions of how we could make the changes. So I know how it works, and I know how it could be changed to work effectively for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, so we were doing fact patterns, and it's interesting that you said that there's some cases that really shouldn't stay in the office a long time. When I graduated from law school, I was a public defender, but I was a public defender in Sarasota, Florida. And I remember we had a case, one of the cases that we went to trial on was a woman that got arrested for DUI, right? She got arrested for DUI, but she had spina bifida. Are you familiar with what that is?
Yes.
Okay, so she had spina bifida, and the police officer wanted her to do a field sobriety test. She's like, I'm not gonna pass that test, right? And and because she couldn't walk in a straight line, he arrested her. And when the case got to the state attorney, she brought her medical records, like, listen, if you tell me to walk in a straight line right now, I can't walk in a straight line. And that woman was in the system for over a year. We went to trial on the case, and it was found not guilty. How is it that, I know there has to be training, some attorneys may not know that. Will you have a process in the office where someone can review a file like that and get it out of the office, even if the frontline person, get it out of the office so this person isn't in the system for a year with an open DUI case?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been a prosecutor here for years, and there are very few times in my experience where a defense attorney has come to me and said, Justin, my client did not do this. They have the wrong person. It wasn't my client. A lot of times, defense attorneys will say, my client didn't commit the crime, or, this and that and the other. But rarely do they say, you have the wrong person. My client, this is not them. They didn't do this. And when they do, I take that seriously. And I look into it. And I have done that on several occasions, and they were absolutely right. And I said, we got to drop this case now. We got the wrong person. And to me, that's one of the worst things that can happen to a human being, is to be charged with a crime that they had nothing to do with, that they didn't commit, that, unfairly. And
then they have to spend money to defend it. They have to,
and to you as a prosecutor, you might have a bunch of cases, and it's not that important to you, but to them, it's the most important case of their life.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
I had one who came to me, he said, my client didn't do this. I said, well, we got his fingerprints at the crime scene. It was a burglary. And we found one set of fingerprints that didn't belong there, and it was your client. Well, let me tell you what happened. The guy that was arrested delivered the bed a year or so earlier to the home. And we found the fingerprint on a cardboard box that had the remote for the bed, and it was in the homeowner's drawer. So when the guy that was accused delivered the bed, he handed them the box. The guy put the box away, and so the fingerprint remained there and never left. So whoever committed this burglary, there were no fingerprints anywhere else in the place. The fingerprints were only on that box.
Yes.
So the only way they could have been there by this guy is if the story matched up, is if he had delivered the bed and that box. Because why would his fingerprints not be anywhere else in the home? Like he took a glove off just to touch that box?
Exactly.
Put the glove on? So when I found that out, I contacted the company. I said, this guy worked for you? And they said, yeah, he was our delivery guy. I said, all right, well, it all makes sense. And I told the victim, look, you were burglarized. They arrested someone. I'm sorry, but they didn't get the right guy. We got to drop this case. We dropped it immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, and that happens. And I remember, like, for 1 year out of law school, I had a guy who wanted me to represent him. He was like, "Oh, I like you." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's okay, you like me, but I have to know what I'm doing, right?" And he was arrested for like a double homicide that happened in Homestead, and he wanted me to represent him. I'm like, "Dude, I haven't been out of school a year. There's no way I'm going to try to do a double homicide case, and you're facing like 52 years." I'm like, I left the PD's office because I didn't like the amount of jail time they were giving people. So like, heck, if I'm going to do a case that you're looking at 52 years. But once I spoke to him, I realized that he really didn't do it, but I wasn't comfortable enough doing that. So I had a friend of mine who had been practicing for a very long time. I took them to his office, and he charged him like $10,000. The family paid the $10,000, and he went and spoke to the prosecutor. They're like, "No, you have to do an Arthur hearing." So they do the Arthur hearing. After the Arthur hearing is done, they realize he didn't do this. But if this guy's family couldn't afford $10,000 for this attorney, he would have been sitting in jail for like 4 or 5 years until the case resolved itself. So it's amazing that you're willing to, take a look at stuff and not have people use up so much time in their life, you know what I mean? Because you can't get those years back, and it's very expensive to prove your innocence sometimes, in a more efficient fashion. So
yeah, I'm a prosecutor, but I'm not like I got to win every case. Conviction at all costs.
But isn't that how you're promoted over there?
Justice.
Yes. So, but the word is that the way to get promoted at the state attorney's office is to have a high conviction rate.
Yeah, trials and stuff like that.
Yeah.
At the state attorney's office, they value how many trials have you done, and to me, it's not a good basis to evaluate an attorney really on any level, and it's not only at the state attorney's office, but in Broward County in general. They say, the criminal defense attorneys, prosecutors.
Yeah.
It's all about number of trials. And to me, it's such a short-sighted way to evaluate somebody. I could have tried in the 7+ years I've been a prosecutor, I could have tried hundreds of cases. It's easy. It's just, you don't make a fair offer. And you say, all right, that's it. We're going to trial.
Mm-hmm.
As a defense lawyer, you could tell your client, it's not a good offer. We should go to trial. You're going to beat it.
Right.
The hard work is to really evaluate the case and say, what's fair, what's true, what's just, and let's get to that point. Every case I've ever tried, I went through exhaustive efforts to try to resolve it fairly. Sometimes begging defense attorneys, convince your client to take this plea. If we go to trial, they're going to face harsh consequences. I had a case recently where the guy was facing 20-something charges. I begged his lawyer, take this offer, convince him to take this offer. It's time served plus 5 years probation, and just don't keep doing what you're doing. Don't keep committing these crimes. Don't bother these victims. And I'll give you 5 charges, not the 20 that you're charged with, 5 charges. You could get out today, sunshine on your face, walking on the beach. The defendant said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm going to keep bothering those victims. I don't like the way they talk about me, blah, blah, blah. I begged the lawyer for months to resolve this case. I'm not blaming the lawyer, right, but I begged him to try to resolve the case with his client. So we went to trial. The guy was convicted of 15 or 16 of the charges, and now the bottom of his guidelines is 11+ years in prison.
Wow. Yes, I had a situation like that too. It was a stalker case. It was it was a little bit of a stalking case, but it wasn't. It didn't start off with that, but that's what he ended up getting charged with. But he's like, I didn't do it. I'm like, sometimes I understand you didn't do it, but if they believe her and they don't believe you, you're gonna get a felony conviction. And they offered him like a misdemeanor something or whether, and he was like, no, no, no. And I feel bad for him because he really believed like he didn't do it, and he went to trial and ended up getting, he had to do 2 years state prison, whereas it would have been like a misdemeanor that he should have been able to live with it. He didn't want to. He was standing on principle or whatever, and ended up doing 2 years state prison. And sometimes that happened, and some people aren't good with probation, you know what I mean? But he probably wish he did them 5 years instead of getting sentenced to 11. So it's one of those things that's really hard.
He hasn't been sentenced yet.
Okay.
That's the bottom of his guidelines. And just based upon his criminal history and the trial and the victims, I think he's going to be sentenced to more than that.
Wow.
I think
wow.
When he's sentenced. I know you had mentioned something about the DUI thing. And since you mentioned it, I want to tell you that part of my plan is to also have a diversion program for people charged with DUIs for the first time, where there's no accident or no injuries, because I think that's another issue where it clogs up the justice system right now, where those cases go on for years, and we have motion to suppress hearings, we have depositions for everyone involved. The cases go on and on, lawyers are hired, paid, and then, eventually either we go to trial and we lose, which the statistics I've heard recently are we lose at the misdemeanor level, we lose 85% of the cases that go to trial.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean all our cases. That means just the ones that go to trial.
Yes.
But if we do resolve the case, then they get DUI school, community service.
Weeks or something. How many weeks is the DUI school? It's a long time when they do the program for DUI.
Well, I don't think it's weeks. I think it's 6 hours or something.
Okay. Because I know it's one. Oh, maybe it's domestic. It's one of the programs that has a very long program that's attached to it.
So anyway, my plan is to have a DUI accountability program where if you're charged with first-time DUI, which is a second-degree misdemeanor, you go through just about all the things that you would go through if you were convicted and put on probation. And if you're successful with all those things, then you're not going to get the DUI. You'll get a reduced charge. So I'm going to give everybody the same sentence they would have gotten and have more people go through that. So hopefully there's less DUIs, we get all that preventative treatment,
right?
But they don't have the DUI on their record, which is what most people are all frightened about.
Right. That's why they don't want it. Yes. So
I think we solve our problem.
Right. Because it almost sounds worse than it really is. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it really sounds worse than it is. Like once someone say you have a DUI, they did, oh my God, you were like driving crazy drunk. But usually it's like someone went to the restaurant, had a couple glasses of wine, they're fine, but they got pulled over and there you go. It's and when I was a PD, that was one of the cases like that always went to trial, DUIs and misdemeanor batteries, because it's one of those things that I usually tell my students, it happens to regular people, right? Like you don't have to be a criminal in order or have any criminal intents whatsoever to get arrested for a DUI, because you're engaging in behavior that's lawful, and it just so happened that you're driving, you get pulled over, you blow that .08 and there you go, so a lot of those cases do tend to go to those were mainly what we did in misdemeanor court with DUIs and domestic battery cases, because it happens to regular people.
Now what I'm talking about, it's not like a radical proposal.
Right.
This is what they do in Miami-Dade County. It's what they do in Palm Beach County. It's what they do in Hillsborough County. And when I was a prosecutor in Pittsburgh, it's the law. It's in statute. The whole state does the same thing, where you get to go through a program. And if you're successful, then you're not a convicted, DUI person.
Right. And so
everybody time and money and resources, everybody.
And absolutely. And that's something. And so Broward County just have a whole bunch of all reputations for all types of things. Right. And one of the other things that people we talk about is that juvenile. So Broward County seems to be the ones that's always trying to direct file juveniles into adult court. What do you think about that? And do you plan on making any changes with that policy?
Yes. So originally, or for many years, it was required by statute that these charges had to be direct filed. That changed I think 2 years ago. It changed fairly recently. And so our office has charged fewer people directly. And there's a lot of things that I criticize the office for. I think they've done a pretty good job on who they've charged directly of youth and who they didn't. I think we could do better. I'd like to do better. I'd like to see no children in adult court. To be frank, and what I think I'm going to do, what I'd like to see happen, is not do direct file at all. But if the case is serious enough where a child should be charged as an adult, then bring it before a grand jury and let them decide.
Okay. All right.
Now, the cases that I've handled that were direct file, I've handled them. They've been shooting cases, carjacking cases. And even then, when I've handled those cases where they're very serious cases, people have been shot and, carjacked by 16 or 17-year-old, I didn't give them adult sentences. We can give them youthful offender sentences,
yes,
which I resolve cases like that. Or we could still sentence them, and this is what I have done, to juvenile sanctions, where they get the same type of punishment sentence as if they were tried as a juvenile, charged as a juvenile.
So there's a case that I talked about with another one of the candidates. And it was out of Dade County. I remember might have been like 5 or 6, maybe even 7 years ago. The kid was 18 years old and he was being prosecuted for a homicide case. But when they were talking about him, he'd been getting arrested. This kid has been getting arrested since he was 9, right? He was 9 years old, getting arrested in and out of the juvenile system for one thing or another. And I'm like, okay, so are you surprised that now this 18-year-old has committed a homicide? And I think, to me, that's a failure on the part of society, right? Because, we want to believe that everybody have good parents that raise them properly and all that stuff. But if a juvenile comes into the system at 9 years old, right, and then you see him back a few months later doing something else, what responsibility, if any, do you think the state attorney should do to maybe provide services or do something? But I mean, if a kid's getting in trouble at 9, something's wrong. Like, something has to be wrong.
Yeah, if they continue to go through the system. So you touched on a lot of things there. One is that some people that are 16 or 17 years old can commit, terrible crimes and have to, face the consequences. Like you said, someone, 17, 18 years old. Another issue that I see happen. So let's step back for a moment. This is a systemic issue that we have with our justice system right now. It was designed a long time ago when Broward County was different, Florida was different. Florida's changed, Broward County has changed immensely, but our system is still the same. And so what we see oftentimes is, and this is what I think is part of what's called the school to prison pipeline, is that juveniles get arrested and charged for severe crimes. Violent crimes, they might not start out that way. They start out, less serious or whatever it may be. But they get arrested, they get detained for maybe 21 days, and then they're released to go home. And then they pick up another charge. And then the same thing happens. And there's, the system was designed where these cases are resolved more quickly, and there's more resources, and there's more officers that supervise them. But right now, there isn't enough. They don't get paid enough. They don't stay long enough supervising the children. So what you're seeing happening is that juveniles are picking up charges, doing their short amount of time, getting released to home confinement, picking up more charges, okay? Then they turn 18, and they pick up their next charge. And all those charges from when they were juvenile come with them, and now they're facing, years and years in prison. And they had no idea that what they were doing was going to result in those consequences.
Right.
And now they're like, oh, wait a minute. Now I'm in adult court, and now I got all these charges, and the bottom of my guidelines are, 20 years in prison. Yeah. And at that point, it's, what can you do at that point? It's hard to, to resolve that.
We need to do something, though, and I'm not sure exactly what that
Absolutely.
is. And
one of the things that I want to do, that I'd like to try, is come up with a program where we could address these types of issues where people might be prone to commit serious crimes, but prevent them from committing the crimes.
Mhm.
So, studies have shown that youth that have been victims of violent crime or have been witnesses to violent crime, they then carry weapons to protect themselves because
Right.
they saw what's happened. And
Yeah.
then what happens is they get into a situation and they use that weapon, and then they're charged with a serious violent crime. So I'd like to create a program with other groups, with other community stakeholders, with the Department of Corrections, with social workers, maybe with people that have been in the system,
Mhm.
and then identify children or youth that have been victims of violent crimes or have been witnesses to violent crimes, and get them counseling from people who have also been there and other people in the community.
Yes.
And maybe we can get to them before they commit the crime.
Because a lot of those children are broken. They're broken, like, just psychologically broken, damaged, just carrying a lot of trauma, trying to go day by day. I actually had a client who lived in he was from Orlando, and he lived in a very high crime community. And his mother worked hard, but she just couldn't afford, she moved from South Florida to Orlando because it was cheaper. Then all of a sudden, Orlando started getting expensive, right? And so she the neighborhoods just kept changing. And he got in trouble for carrying a weapon. And he said, listen, I had to carry a gun because if I don't, I'm going to get shot just trying to get home, right? And the day he doesn't have a gun, he gets shot like 3 times. Like he didn't die. He's like, I didn't have the gun today. The people came, they started shooting at me, and he ended up getting shot like 3 times. So he survives the shooting. So you can't convince this guy to not have a gun, because the day he didn't have a gun, and he was a felon because of traffic citation, because they'll make you a felon for driving while license suspended 3 or 4 times there, right?
Yes.
So he's a felon for that. So now he gets arrested, because this is how he comes to me as an immigration client, for possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, it's crazy what he's in this situation, but it's so many things that are involved that for these children, these young men and women, to find themselves in this situation, because he literally lived in a neighborhood that they could not afford to get out of. So he was trying to make the best of it. He's like, okay, I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not going, and he gets shot like 3 times. And then how you going to convince this dude that can't afford to move to like not carry a gun? It's crazy. I mean, it's not a simple answer. It's going to take a lot of people working together to try to figure it out. And one of the things you talked about is like mental health and addiction. A lot of a lot more of that, I think, needs to happen, as opposed to criminalizing all this behavior. There's this whole movement about defunding the police. I don't agree with the word that they're using, but I think what people really want is for, law to take some responsibilities out of the hand of law enforcement and put it more in the hands of professionals, social workers, psychologists, maybe even psychiatrists in some instances, but just in the hands of different people instead of police officers. What's your position on that?
Yes, well, here's the idea, is that we have a certain amount of money, certain amount of resources to put towards protecting the community. And do we want to put, which is what we've been doing throughout the country for a long time, put more of that towards, arresting and jailing people that are committing crimes? Or do we want to put more of that towards helping people not commit crimes to begin with?
Right.
To address the underlying issues that result in criminal activity. And of course, I think most people would agree that money would be better spent trying to help people, avoid committing crimes, being arrested, being jailed, than it would be just locking people up and arresting people and, everything that comes with that. And when people come in contact with police, oftentimes it's not just that they get arrested and go to jail, that sometimes they get killed.
Yeah.
So, sometimes they get beat up. So if we could avoid, as many contacts with law enforcement as possible, it's better off for everybody.
It is better off for everybody. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So we're almost hitting that hour mark, and we're talking, and I hope, I'm learning a lot from you, and I hope the people, when they see this video, they get a good idea on your position. So I did tell you that there was a few more things that we were going to touch on, and I just want to.
I could talk for hours about these issues.
Right. Because it is
make a lot of headway.
Yes.
And, I want to tell you and the people paying attention, if anybody has any questions or wants to talk to me about any issues, they can give me a call, an email, a text message. You go to my website. It's mccormackforstateattorney.com. I took a long time writing out what I thought were important issues and how we would address them. If I am elected state attorney, there's a number of issues that I find to be important. There's even more, but I think at some point people are going to say, "Okay, I read enough, Justin. I get the point. I see where you're going."
Yes.
But I wrote about a lot of issues that are important to me. I wrote everything. So if you want to read about them, learn about them, I wrote about immigration and the consequences, about drugs, about juvenile justice, about marijuana. I don't want to prosecute, possession of marijuana. I think it's a waste of time. So you could go to McCormackStateAttorney.com. You could email me. You can find me on Facebook, Justin McCormack for State Attorney, Twitter, Justin McCormack, Instagram, Justin McCormack. Feel free to contact me and talk to me about anything.
Yes. Okay. So, but I need to get you on. I need to get
Sure.
answers recorded, right? Death penalty. What's your take on? So we're gonna do a little rapid fire. Death penalty.
Sure.
What's your position on death penalty?
There are 23 states that don't have the death penalty. There are 3 governors that have abolished the death penalty, or put a moratorium rather on the death penalty. So right now there are 25 states that have the death penalty. I don't think any state should have the death penalty. I think we need to go towards the other 25 states that are not doing it, as well as the rest of the world, the evolved world, the Western world that's not killing people for committing crimes.
Yes.
However, I realize it's the law in Florida, and I will consider it and have a panel that reviews death penalty cases. And if the law calls for it, as state attorney, I'll have to seek the death penalty sometimes.
Right.
There are many laws that I don't agree with that I have to enforce. I don't make the laws.
Right. And that's good. And I think with some of the other programs that you're talking about implementing, particularly the ones dealing with juveniles, if we can get to people younger and provide them with some social services, therapies, different type of treatments that they need, I believe in the long run, you're going to maybe reduce, not have someone killing someone. You're going to prevent more crime and
Absolutely.
finding someone on death row. Because there's a bunch of series about death row, and all of them seem to have had like traumatic experiences in their childhood. Yeah, when they were young. So if we can get them early and try to do something about that, maybe, when they turn
absolutely
30.
prevent some murders.
Yes, you absolutely can prevent murders. So I think the things that you're trying to do will probably just reduce that number in itself, even if not in the first 4 years. If you get the job and you get to stay in it, in the long term, you'll be able to implement policies that can make that change, right?
We, as a country, we've convicted people and sent them to death row, right?
Yes.
And then we found out they didn't do it, and we exonerated them.
Can you imagine?
Once that person's executed, there's no going back.
No going back.
There's no, you know what, we had the wrong guy. We gotta run this back. We gotta reverse this.
Yeah.
So how can you continue with something like that where you make a mistake? There's no going back. There's no reversing it. The Supreme Court can reverse a lot of things, but they can't reverse the electrocution, the lethal injection.
Not at all. And I think there's some cases in Broward where that's happened, where, DNA exonerated people for crimes they were convicted of, right? That's definitely one thing. So salary, what can you do about trying to maybe get the people to, when they come in, I heard that they've increased the salary for new incoming state attorneys, but how can you pay more to get more experienced attorneys to stay in the office longer?
So they raised the legislature has raised the salary for starting assistant state attorneys, and our office did a good job of giving everybody else raises to keep them with that. Yeah. We have to go to the legislature continuously to try to get more money to give prosecutors. And as a state attorney, I will be more vocal in my role with talking to the legislature, not just about this, but about laws that I think should be implemented or repealed. And specifically, immediately, what I can do is when the new state attorney comes in, Michael Satz is leaving, along with a number of senior prosecutors that have been there for a long time. They're retiring, and their large salaries from working there for so long are also coming off the books.
Yeah.
So I'll be able to take that money and spread it around to retain quality assistant state attorneys. And then going forward, I'd like to give raises based on merit and people that are are doing well with their work, promotions and raises.
Good job. All right, cash bail.
Okay, that's another thing we can talk about for a long time.
Yes.
But I'll give you the short answer.
Yes.
Cash bail is discriminatory on its face. Okay. It's all about, oh, if you got the money, you could get out. If you don't, you're stuck in. And what it does is it harms poor people, because poor people generally don't have the extra $1,000 or $3,000 or $5,000. So I would like to get away from cash bail. My ideal system would be no cash bail. It would be where we have like a pretrial assessment, risk assessment that goes through a number of factors and lets people out ROR, or put them out on monitor, or put them out on different things, or just hold them pretrial to begin with. When I take over initially, there's going to be a number that I've identified of crimes where I'm not going to seek bail at all, like 20 to 25 charges I've already looked at. You know, theft, driving while license suspended, DUI, possession of drugs, all types of crimes like that, where we're going to not seek to bail. We're going to ROR them. We're going to say, ask the court to release under overcognizance.
Okay.
Holding people in jail for a few days only causes more harm.
Yes. People lose their jobs. They lose their apartments. They lose their children.
Everything.
Yes.
So what happens then?
Yeah. What happens then? And yeah, so it's definitely one of those things that are very difficult, because I have another client now that he was speeding in Key West, and it ended up being he was going fast. I'm not gonna say the man wasn't going fast, right? He was going fast. The police was trying to stop him while he was slowing down. He hit like a tree or something, but no accident, whatever. And the judge in Key West wants to send him to 30 days in the county jail for a reckless drive. I'm just like, are you serious? This dude is going to lose his job.
Lose his home. He's going to lose his job. Maybe lose his kids.
Everything. 30 days. I mean, so yeah, so that's definitely something that someone needs to get involved, you know, and just.
Oh yeah, I'm on board with, you know, the reform movement and ending cash bail. And
okay, so now when you come into the office, you're doing a lot of very innovative things. You want to change the culture of the office right now. How are you going to get your state attorneys to buy into what it is that you're doing? And if they don't, what are you going to do?
Well, I'm going to have conversations with them like you and I are having now. And I mean, hopefully you could see where I'm coming from, that I make sense, that it's not, you know, outrageous or radical, that it's for the benefit of everybody, and that it's a smarter way of trying to address a lot of the ills that our society faces. And we're going to have training and recruiting and hiring. And I'd like to recruit prosecutors, forward-thinking prosecutors from all over the country, not just locally. You know, most of our prosecutors now come from nowhere Southeastern University. We don't go recruiting prosecutors. I went to University of Florida. Nobody from the Broward State Attorney's office came to talk to me about working down here.
Too.
I came on my own.
Yes.
I want to recruit prosecutors from law schools at historically Black colleges and universities throughout the country. I want to recruit a diverse group of people. I think it's easy to get them to come to Florida. I think I could sell it to them.
It's not hard
Beautiful.
To sell Florida.
Florida Beach. You got a diverse community. You're going to have great experience. You're going to meet a lot of lawyers, a lot of judges. You're going to work on a lot of interesting cases right away. And if you don't want to do things, you know, the way I'm talking about, then working in my office might not be the best fit for you.
Right. Okay. So thank you very much. And I think we hit on everything. There's some other, you know, again, we can talk for a long time about a different.
Talk all day.
Yes, we can talk all day. And I had a great conversation with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do it. I think we got on everything. We didn't get into implicit bias, but we all know that. We got to make people aware. We got to address the issues.
Everybody has implicit biases.
Yeah.
But with training, those can be addressed and corrected.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so we need regular of that type of training.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes people aren't aware. They don't realize that they do.
That's why it's implicit.
Yeah, that's why it's implicit.
People have explicit biases, which are the worst.
Right. Yeah, right. Because
then there's implicit, where you don't even know.
You don't even know.
That's thoughts going on. But like I said, studies have shown with training that can be addressed.
Yeah, and it goes both ways. It could be you can have a bias that you favor one over another. I remember when I first went on a field trip to like a jail. We went to a women's jail, and I was like, why are these women in jail? Like, I didn't know women go to jail because I grew up in my mom, my mom had 5 kids. She had a husband. She didn't have time to go get in trouble because she was raising her kids and taking care of her husband. So when I saw a woman, I was like, how is she getting in trouble? Doesn't she have a husband? Doesn't she have children? Where does she have time to go do something? So in my mind, I just couldn't register that women are out here committing all kind of crazy crimes, right? But so it was a bias that I had that I would have never, like, if they came and told me this woman did something, I'm like, no, she can't do that. She's the wife of the mom. What are you talking about? So it can go in favor of one and against another. So definitely it is something.
It's real. It's a problem, and we can address that.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much. So your election is August 18, 2020. Right. So before we close off, tell us what stay what you're running for again. Tell us how everyone can get in touch with you, how they can donate, volunteer their time to help you out with your campaign.
I'm running for state attorney of Broward County. You can go to mccormackforstateattorney.com. You can email me there. You can contact me there. You can contact me, like I said, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. If you want to help out, if you want to donate, I'm willing to have you come help with me, make phone calls, come walk with me. And, money always helps too. I haven't been asking many people for money because I know it's a tough time to do that. But if you'd like to throw in, $10, $20 to help me get my message out there, I will accept it, and I will make sure we get the most value of dollars.
All right. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.